The issues that matter most to you. Join the conversation. This is News and Views with Rob Snow on News Talk 580 CFRA.
Wow, great looking afternoon. Beautiful weather.
Sunshine out there.
Okay, so coming up on the program, Jodie Emery, what I call the princess of pot. Mark Emery's wife.
Yes.
Marijuana legalization advocate calling in from British Columbia right after the 1:30 news. The Prime Minister, I suspect this is part of the Prime Minister's year-end interviews. He does the tour of various media outlets for interviews that will be either published at length or air in length in the newspapers and on the broadcast outlets. And he sat down with the editorial board of the Toronto Star on Friday and said, marijuana's not legal yet, and I see no reason why the police should not be enforcing the country's marijuana laws.
Yeah, and it's a good point, but I mean, a lot of police officers that I've talked to have said, why should we bother if it's going to be legal in a while? Why are we wasting our time doing this? The courts let them off, especially the courts now that we're looking at marijuana legalization in the not-too-distant future. They're
yours is the
wasting their
government,
time.
sorry, Norman, yours is the government that set us on the path to what we have now, which is de facto legalization.
Yeah. There's a legal limbo surrounding this. That's
well, yeah, and all of this is in anticipation of the big marijuana report, which is supposed to be released in the middle of December. The rumored date is the 21st of December. They struck a task force. Bill Blair, the former chief of police, is a member of that task force. Anne McClellan, who was kind of a super minister during the Chrétien government days, is also a member of that task force. And they've been looking at all sorts of things, from distribution and retailing and age limits, and should there be warning labels? Should there be bans on advertising and marketing? That was a question I was asking the listeners yesterday. You know, you think about it this way. Say you want to treat marijuana. You hear this all the time. Just treat marijuana the same way you treat alcohol, right? But is that really the path that you want when you think about things like marketing and advertising?
Yeah.
Budweiser and the Clydesdales during the Super Bowl game. Do you expect to see marijuana companies advertising what a great high it is during a Super Bowl broadcast, for example? I don't think a lot of parents would like to see that.
No, I think you're going to see it go more the way of tobacco advertising, which is virtually non-existent now.
It's illegal, right?
I think that's probably the route they're going to take. I think one of the big questions they have to answer, and this is something police forces are worried about, how do you detect whether a driver is impaired by THC when you stop an erratic motorist on the road? That's a big question that they're going to have to answer.
So we'll be talking about that. Jodie Emery, in anticipation of this huge report coming out probably in about 2 weeks from Vancouver, calling in again. That's coming up right after the 1:30 news. All right, coming up right after the 1:30 news. Jodie Emery is going to join us, a well-known marijuana legalization advocate, and she's going to join us from Vancouver. That's coming right up. News Talk 580 CFRA.
We'll return with more News and Views with Rob Snow on News Talk 580 CFRA. The issues that matter most to you. Join the conversation. This is News and Views with Rob Snow on News Talk 580 CFRA.
So the rumors are true. The big marijuana report from the task force is going to be released on December 21st, the path to legalization, as we welcome back Jodie Emery, marijuana legalization advocate in Vancouver today. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm actually in Toronto today.
In Toronto today.
Vancouver tomorrow.
That's too bad for you, I guess. Listen, Toronto, that's perfect, because in the Toronto Star this weekend, I'm going to read it to you, Jodie, and then you can give me your reaction, okay? A frustrated Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, this was in an interview with Robert Benzie in the Toronto Star this weekend. A frustrated Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wants police to, quote, enforce the law and criminally charge illegal marijuana dispensaries, even though weed legalization is looming. People are right now breaking the law, Trudeau told the Star's editorial board on Friday. We haven't changed the laws. We haven't legalized it yet. What's your reaction to that?
Well, Justin Trudeau would be wise to learn about the history of marijuana law reform in Canada. In fact, breaking the law by opening dispensaries and providing access to patients, that's the only way we've changed the laws in this country. It's through peaceful civil disobedience and decades of it. Most people are well aware of Mark Emery breaking the law defiantly, even the Sunday shopping laws long ago, which are now repealed. So we have Justin Trudeau ordering the police to enforce the mandatory minimum sentences that he voted for when Harper was in power. It's extremely scary for me to know that all of the peaceful people who work for us wake up every day wondering if today's the day they get arrested and go to jail for something that will be legal only because of this type of activism.
But not legal yet. That's what he's saying, not legal yet.
Again, but why should we be patient? This has been a multi-decades-long campaign against peaceful people. Trudeau didn't support legalization in the beginning. He only supported decriminalization. He said that his own late brother had been arrested for pot possession and that young people are being hurt by being charged and it's costing taxpayers millions of dollars. That was his initial position. He even supported dispensaries 3 years ago in Winnipeg when he showed up and said they were good businesses. So why has he changed his tune? Well, it's very clear from the last year that the Health Canada licensed producers, which are under a Harper government system, have been lobbying the government to raid dispensaries, shut them down because their stock market performance wasn't going so well. And every time that the police come in and enforce the law against dispensaries, which again are responsible for law reform in this country through court orders, every time that happens, the stocks for these licensed producers go up. It's really appalling to see the former police and politicians and even prime ministers opening and running these licensed producers and then selling pot themselves while ordering the police to go and arrest their competition, the peaceful people who built this industry, suffered for it, sacrificed, went to jail, protested in the streets, ran for office. We won. After 20-plus years of campaigning through cannabis culture with Mark Emery sacrificing and many others too, we won. So stop arresting us.
Well, I mean, actually, I guess, Jodie, he won, right? He is saying so. He says, quote in the Toronto Star, again, so I don't know how much clearer we can be that we're not legalizing marijuana to please recreational users. What do you think of that quote?
Well, who is he doing it to please? Because the only beneficiaries of his new position are the police, who get billions of dollars from marijuana law enforcement, which mostly targets the young and the poor and minorities, and also the licensed producers, who his government has endlessly promoted. In fact, the chief financial officer of the Liberal Party started Tweed, the biggest marijuana growing company in Canada, which tomorrow is holding a private meeting with members of Parliament to tell them how legalization is going to be. Again, it's really upsetting that these very same companies did not sacrifice. They didn't pay the price. They didn't do anything to make it legal, but they're trying to push out the very same people who built this industry and made it possible. These are peaceful, nonviolent people we're talking about. Every day, Canadians get arrested for pot. They become second-class citizens when they lose their jobs, their kids, their right to travel. These are laws that have hurt people. And again, Trudeau used to say that those kind of law enforcement, that shouldn't happen. Again, he brought up his own late brother and said he was harmed by these laws. So why is Trudeau wanting to enforce these laws? Qui bono? Who benefits? The police and the licensed producers, and the taxpayers lose millions of dollars, and innocent people get charged every day, and they're told to be patient. But I'm telling you that we are not going to be patient when injustice happens every single day in this country.
So you're saying, Jodie Emery, that the reason it's taking so long to craft the rules around legal marijuana is because the Trudeau government is being influenced by what are now billion-dollar marijuana companies? Is that what you think is going on? Yeah.
Well, it's made clear. In fact, the licensed producers have lobbying groups, and they're meeting with government. They're holding meetings, and they say in the press that their stock market isn't performing as well because of the competition, which is illegal. But again, legalization is supposed to be about civil liberties. When Justin Trudeau says he's not doing this to please the recreational consumer, he's spitting in the face of the millions of Canadian adults who are professional and responsible and otherwise law-abiding who voted for him because they believed legalization would look like Amsterdam or Colorado, where you have no crisis, no chaos, you've got jobs being created, schools being built out of the money that's being raised. There's so much potential if they legalize it properly. But this is a nation of overregulation, and the Liberals are certainly no stranger to cronyism and corruption. So it does look like this is just the status quo, and it's very scary to know that Prohibition 2.0 is being called legalization and being designed by the very same people who enforced Prohibition all these years, including Bill Blair, and you've got Anne McClellan. She represents the law firm that covers these task producers. You've got all these insiders who are constantly condemning and criticizing we, the people who are peaceful and sacrifice to make these changes possible. It's really offensive.
Okay. Jodie Emery's here, marijuana legalization advocate with medical marijuana right now, medical marijuana, not recreational marijuana. With medical marijuana, the rules are you can only buy it legally. Okay, if you're following all the rules to the letter, you have to buy it from a producer that is licensed by Health Canada, right?
That's correct.
And then shipped to you by courier, by
yes,
Canada Post or another courier company. That's for medical marijuana. So there seemed to be an indication in John Iveson's column in the National Post this week that they might actually lean that way for recreational marijuana, not necessarily because that's the best way to go, but that it might actually be good for Canada Post. It would be a boon for Canada Post. What do you think about that?
I think it's absurd that they're trying to deprive millions of Canadians from engaging in farming, tourism, medicine, research, agriculture, all of these jobs, by trying to just say, oh, we'll help Canada Post, but nobody else. And let's remember that this mail-order-only medical marijuana program was designed by the Harper government, and it was designed to be restrictive and limited and almost impossible to actually do. But he was ordered by the courts to let it happen. We've had a recent federal court decision also saying that mail-order programs are not sufficient, and that's why dispensaries are being protected, being called the heart of access, and that's why patients have won the right to grow their own, because mail-order marijuana is not going to meet the needs of this country. The dispensaries that are opening up everywhere are simple economics, supply and demand. The people speak with their dollars, whether it's about organic juice or green technology. They want cannabis. They want it to look like Amsterdam, and that's what we have chosen to do. We're trying to demonstrate what legalization should look like, and that's why we're so successful. But this government's language has been about restricting access, limiting access, introducing harsher penalties, introducing harsher laws. So this is not the type of legalization.
But shouldn't the end consumer have some assurance of quality control from marijuana? For example, we here in this city, just like in Toronto and in Vancouver, Montreal, we have these dispensaries that are popping up all over the place. Okay. What assurances are there that, first of all, it's quality product, it's not laced with chemicals, and the profits aren't going to biker gangs or other organized criminals? How do we know where this product is coming from?
Well, the police actually say out of their own reports in court that only 5% of marijuana criminals, quote unquote, are connected to organized crime. Everyone else is just a mom and pop grower, the very same people who have been doing this for generations. So when you have this sort of limited idea of where it comes from, you have to ask why. Well, it's prohibition. The government's own prohibition law enforcement requires people hide. It requires they smuggle. It requires that they avoid detection. And sure, that's going to cause things to maybe go off in some batches. But we've got decades of marijuana use, millions of Canadians using marijuana with no harm or negative effect. In fact, the worst you might get is maybe a bud went a little moldy. When you go to a grocery store and you go to those pesticide-covered apples and oranges and fruits that you feed to your kids, and you buy some strawberries and one of them is covered in green fuzzy mold, you don't freak out and shut down the grocery store. You just throw out that moldy strawberry, but you're pretty sure that the rest of it has passed some sort of testing to make it safe for human consumption. But that's why we need more organic, local, homegrown production. Right now, the big licensed producers are using different pesticides. Health Canada just approved more pesticides for them to use, and they're irradiating it. Whereas many of the boutique growers that we provide cannabis from, they're using organic growing technologies. They've been doing this for decades. They want a good product. People who are in business want customers to come back. They don't want to poison them. They don't want to kill them. They want them to come back and buy more. So when you have a product like cannabis, which is so popular and so very, very wide-ranging, you're going to have people asking for all sorts of different quality assurances. And when it comes to medical marijuana, I believe you should have that in a very sterile facility. You don't need to treat it like a pharmaceutical because, well, as we know, pharmaceuticals that doctors push are killing and addicting people every day across this country. Marijuana has never killed anyone, but you should grow that in a safe facility.
All right. Okay. Well, I could talk to you all afternoon, but we have to wrap it up there on that point, okay? Good to hear from you.
I'm just envisioning
Again, I'm sorry to hear that you're in Toronto today, but safe travels back to Vancouver.
Excellent. I'll be in Ottawa in January and Montreal in the next week.
Okay,
so
hopefully we can have you in here in the new year. Thanks again.
Oh, thank
Bye-bye.
you. Yep. Take care.
Bye. Jodie Emery. Marijuana legalization activist, advocate, and very interesting person to speak to, even if you don't agree with her all the time.
Every day as events happen, we're there. Now back to News and Views with Rob Snow on News Talk 580 CFRA.
1047, News and Views. 580 CFRA, Rob Snow. And a big question for you this morning, and we're going to be doing a lot of programs between now and the end of the month on legal marijuana because there's a task force. The recommendations have been made. It's been submitted to the government, and it's going to be made public on the 21st of December. And there are a lot of issues surrounding the legalization of marijuana for recreational purposes. My question for you this morning is, do you think it will be good for the economy? Will legal marijuana be good for the economy? I want to get into this today because a lot of people think it will be good for the Canadian economy. They think it's going to create a lot of jobs, including my special guest yesterday, marijuana activist Jodie Emery.
It's absurd that they're trying to deprive millions of Canadians from engaging in farming, tourism, medicine, research, agriculture, all of these jobs, by trying to just say, oh, we'll help Canada Post, but nobody else. And let's remember that this mail-order-only medical marijuana program was designed by the Harper government, and it was designed to be restrictive and limited and almost impossible to actually do. But he was ordered by the courts to let it happen. We've had a recent federal court decision also saying that mail-order programs are not sufficient, and that's why dispensaries are being protected, being called the heart of access, and that's why patients have won the right to grow their own, because mail-order marijuana is not going to meet the needs of this country. The dispensaries that are opening up everywhere are simple economics, supply and demand. The people speak with their dollars, whether it's about organic juice or green technology. They want cannabis. They want it to look like Amsterdam, and that's what we have chosen to do.
Again, Jodie Emery on my program yesterday afternoon here on 580 CFRA, the economics of legal marijuana. What does your gut tell you? Where do you stand on this issue? I mean, in case you haven't noticed, the economy isn't exactly lighting it up, so to speak. The word of the day for the economy is gloomy. It's gloomy. CBC reports this morning. Finance Canada is giving business leaders a decidedly gloomy picture of the Canadian economy as part of the Finance Department's pre-budget consultations this fall. The slideshow projects weak annual growth of just 1.8% on average until the year 2029, and cites full-time job losses of 1.9% across Canada so far this calendar year. So, you see, it's gloomy. Trudeaunomics, it's gloomy. Bank of Canada doesn't raise interest rates today because the economy is gloomy. And the deficit was supposed to, you remember, stimulate the economy. There was to be a windfall for infrastructure. That investment has yet to materialize. We have child care checks that have been in the mail, modest middle-class tax cut. But the job numbers are tepid. GDP numbers suspect all year because of the wildfire in Fort McMurray. Less than 2% growth for the next 15 years. 1.9% loss in full-time jobs in 1 year. You're in the range of 270,000 full-time job losses. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of jobs. That's from the finance minister this week. So, yeah, it's gloomy. It's gloomy, right? So along comes an industry that is flying high, so to speak. And all it's waiting for is the green light, so to speak. And it's the pot business, the weed business, marijuana business. Do you think it would be good for the economy? The marijuana business. Do you think it would be good for the economy if marijuana was legal for recreational purposes? Here's a little more of Jodie Emery.
Chosen to do. We're trying to demonstrate what legalization should look like, and that's why we're so successful. But this government's language has been about restricting access, limiting access, introducing harsher penalties, introducing harsher laws. So this is not the type of legalization.
But shouldn't the end consumer have some assurance of quality control from marijuana? For example, we here in this city, just like in Toronto and in Vancouver, Montreal, we have these dispensaries that are popping up all over the place. Okay, what assurances are there that, first of all, it's quality product, it's not laced with chemicals, and the profits aren't going to biker gangs or other organized criminals? How do we know where this product is coming from?
Well, the police actually say out of their own reports in court that only 5% of marijuana criminals, quote unquote, are connected to organized crime. Everyone else is just a mom and pop grower, the very same people who have been doing this for generations. So when you have this sort of limited idea of where it comes from, you have to ask why. Well, it's prohibition. The government's own prohibition law enforcement requires people hide. It requires they smuggle. It requires that they avoid detection. And sure, that's going to cause things to maybe go off in some batches. But we've got decades of marijuana use, millions of Canadians using marijuana with no harm or negative effect. In fact, the worst you might get is maybe a bud went a little moldy.
Jodie Emery on the program yesterday. Do you think it would be good for the economy if marijuana was legal? Now, coming up after the 11 o'clock news, we're going to go through some of the numbers from Colorado, which is a few years into this experiment now. And the three big numbers are 996 million, 2.3 billion, and 18,000. 996 million. That's how much weed was sold in Colorado last year. In one state. In one state. $2.3 billion in economic output and 18,000 full-time jobs. Would it be good for the economy? Joanne, good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Hi.
So you asked the question very pointedly, is it good for the economy? And so I just want to throw out, what will it cost the economy? What will it cost the culture? There are many ways to measure the success of a society and the success of an economy. People who are able and ready and prepared to work, whether it's their education or it's their work ethic, frankly, because the greatest generation that ever was, they weren't highly educated, but my God, they were prepared to work. And they built what we have today, and they didn't do it by numbing their brains. In fact, they did it in spite of being numbed by 2 world wars. So when we look at what it will cost us overall in healthcare, in productivity, the cost to our youth, and what will it do to them and their ambition?
Yes.
I know that people are saying under 25 it should be prohibited. At minimum, I would hope that would be the case. Quality control, very controlled access like an LCBO. and we have a black market now, I know we'll have a black market later, just like we do for booze, where not that it's made at home, but that kids are stealing it anyway, right? They're getting their older siblings to buy it for them, etc. But I think that when we're dealing with this gloomy economy and no hope and a government that really is spending recklessly all around the world, they're not just misspending our money.
Are you saying $92 coat hooks, that's not normal in Joanne's house in Orleans? So you don't spend that kind of money on coat hooks in Orleans?
How did you know? No,
look,
that's
Joanne,
not normal.
I hope you listen to the second hour of the program, because we're going to go over, it will create jobs. There will be economic spin-offs to this. It will be a billion-dollar industry. It will employ a lot of smart people, but at what cost? After the news.
The issues that matter most to you. Join the conversation. This is News and Views with Rob Snow on News Talk 580 CFRA.
Let's dig a little deeper into this. Do you think marijuana would be good for the economy? If marijuana was legal, would it be good for the Canadian economy? And I'll throw these numbers at you, and you share your opinion. What happened in Colorado? Okay, so this is a report came out about a month ago from a group called the Marijuana Policy Group, and there was a lengthy write-up about it in the Washington Post. A 25-page report fittingly called The Impact of Marijuana Legalization in Colorado. And the big numbers are $996 million. That's how much weed was sold in one state, in Colorado, during all of 2015. So it's a billion-dollar industry in one U.S. state. And the population of Colorado, according to the Google machine, is about 5 million people. And the GDP of Colorado is just shy of $300 billion U.S. dollars. So those numbers place Colorado very close to a province like British Columbia. BC has a population of about 5 million and a GDP of between $200 and $3 billion. Okay? So a few numbers there for you. $2.3 billion in total economic activity generated by the marijuana industry in 1 year, and 18,000 full-time jobs created. They call it FTEs, full-time equivalent positions. 18,000 full-time jobs. There's an area in Colorado, it's called the Front Range. The Front Range. And this is where all the marijuana companies are setting up shop, in places like Denver and Aurora, Boulder, Colorado Springs. And it's called the Front Range area of Colorado. And it is now being called the Silicon Valley of pot. This is where marijuana goes high tech, how to develop pot that is low cost and highly potent. The most buzz for the buck, if you will. And it says the marijuana industry is going to grow in Colorado at a rate of more than 11% a year, every year for the next 5 years. Total sales are going to peak at $1.5 billion, and it is great for the government. In sin taxes, marijuana is already bringing in more excise tax than alcohol to the state, by far, 3 times as much excise tax. It is bringing in more money to the state than gambling. Tobacco is still the highest generating sin tax, but they say in 5 years it will be pot. It will generate $2.3 billion a year in economic activity, and it breaks it down into all sorts of primary and secondary industries: cultivation, sales, manufacturing, testing, warehousing. Apparently, building a warehouse right now is a very good business to be in if you're in suburban Denver. You need a place to put all the weed. Banking and finance, legal services, climate engineering, lighting, HVAC. It's big business. It's serious stuff. It's growing, and it's growing fast. But is it good for the economy? I mean, you read this report, you'd swear there are no downsides at all, and we should go for it. The sooner the better. They say it's a localized industry. It's a domestic industry. It's grown in Colorado. It's sold in Colorado. For every dollar spent on pot in Colorado, it generates $2.40 in economic activity. And it goes rather into detail about the actual cost of operating a marijuana business on the wholesale side and on the retail side. The biggest expense is actually growing the stuff. Then there are payroll expenses. That's the second largest expense. Rent on warehouses, security, compliance, making sure everyone follows all the rules, consulting. The consultants. Is there anything they can't do? A big expense is hydro. Almost all of the weed in Colorado is grown indoors. Can you imagine the hydro bill? Fertilizer, pesticides. Then you move to the retail side. All sorts of other costs. Not unlike the cost of running any other sort of retailing outlet. Payroll, rent, hydro, point of sale systems, cash registers, debit machines. Compliance, security, data entry. There are added expenses if you're in the edibles business. And so all of this has happened within the last 2 years. The professional services industry is loving it. There are now units of major law firms. All they do is marijuana law, marijuana-related legal work. The consultancies have moved into, I think, Anderson Consulting or KPMG or PricewaterhouseCoopers have teams in Colorado with the marijuana practice. Investment banking, lobbying. It is the fastest growing industry in Colorado. Tourism. 20% of all the pot sold in Colorado is purchased by tourists. 50 metric tons a year. Some people go to Colorado just to smoke pot. That's the only reason now they visit the state. Oh, yeah, it's the Rockies. Show me the pot cafe. I want to go to Pikes Peak. But first, let's hit up the pot store. Others go there for the fabulous skiing and the hiking, everything that comes with the Rocky Mountain experience. But there are those who go there on a business trip. They buy marijuana when they're there. But 20% of the demand is pot tourism demand. But the long and short of it is 2 years and a little more into this experiment in Colorado. The claim is 18,000 full-time jobs, $1 billion industry at retail, $2.3 billion in economic output, a windfall for government, and an industry that's growing at about 11% a year every year and will do so for the next 5 years. But is it good for the economy? Is it good for the economy? Anna, good morning.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Anna.
Hi. Yeah, undoubtedly, a lot of people will make money on it. So they have every interest to push it. There's no doubt about that. You just named them all. Now, do we make decisions strictly on economy? I don't know, because we banned cigarettes. We are banning the UCAs. So they were bringing in money, too.
We haven't banned cigarettes.
Well, from public places and everywhere else.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, from that point of view, sure. Yeah, we've made it more difficult, and we tightly control where people can smoke, certainly.
Yes, and there's hardly anywhere they have left to smoke. They can only smoke in their own homes, I guess, if they live in apartments that they do not rent or that they allow smoking in. Anyway, the decisions are made strictly on economic basis, these decisions. And the other thing is the demand. This woman who went on the radio and said, well, it's all a demand and supply situation. The demand for smoking pot is only if you have smoked pot. You don't wake up one morning and go, oh, I'm really craving for that marijuana cigarette that I've never had, but I really have to have. That doesn't happen. So it's a habit-forming thing.
But usage of pot is on the increase. In fact, there's a report out, and we're going to be speaking to an expert from the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, with a report just this morning that pot use is climbing and climbing significantly.
So is suicide. Do we encourage it? I mean, just because people use it, it doesn't mean we have to encourage it. What I'm saying is it's really a matter of policy, what you want to encourage and what you don't want to encourage.
Okay.
But it's
so if it's a matter
forming,
sure.
And
we're going
demand
to go,
is created.
And we're going to go through some of the downsides.
Benefit.
And we're going to go through some of the downsides.
Yeah.
So we're going to weigh the positives and the negatives. Okay? There's economic activity associated with this.
Definitely,
right?
people
In
will
the billions
will
of
get
dollars.
enriched from it. I have no doubt.
Okay.
They will push it all they can.
Okay. So what are you saying? On the whole, on balance, it's not worth it?
On the whole, on balance, I'm not going to make money from it, and I don't think you will. So whoever will make money from it will have a benefit.
What if you were making money from it?
If I had idols, hundreds of thousands, or whatever it takes to start a business, sure I would. Why not?
All right.
Why not make money?
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. Yeah, coming up, when are we doing that? Right after the 11:30 news. Thank you. New survey released just this morning by the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. Pot use has doubled in 20 years. Significant increases found among all age groups, but especially young people, 29 and under. 29 and under. 20 years ago, 18% of those 29 and under smoked pot. 18%. As of last year, it was up 20 points. 38% of people 18 to 29 are now smoking pot. Back after this.
Now back to News and Views with Rob Snow on News Talk 580 CFRA.
To Anna's point, if your only concern is money, then I guess you could draw the conclusion that legalizing marijuana is a no-brainer. Look at all the money, look at all the jobs. It's been great for the Treasury in Colorado. $120 million in new taxes that it never had before. $1 billion in sales in a year. $2 billion in economic output. 18,000 full-time jobs created in the last 2 years. So go for it, right? Go for it. And in about 2 weeks, we'll see the Canadian government's plan for going for it and legalizing marijuana for recreational purposes. Rumored release date December 21st. And if you look at the upside, you would conclude, hey, sunshine and lollipops. There's always the downside, though. What's the cost to society? Here's a little bit from Newsweek magazine called The Unexpected Side Effects. I just quote here, okay? Newsweek magazine. Symptoms of Colorado's pot culture include increased use among teens, resulting in educational problems in middle schools and high schools, a spike in edibles-related ER visits, consumption by children, resulting in illness and death. Teen drug-related expulsions from school are on the rise. The notion that prisons filled with minor drug offenders would be relieved of overcrowding has been blown to smithereens. Denver's homeless population has exploded, and there are indications that finite tourist dollars are going to more pot-related tourist experiences and less to Colorado's iconic natural wonders. In March of this year, plants at several growing facilities in Denver had to be quarantined because of the misuse of pesticides. The pesticides, it turns out, were improvised concoctions of chemicals, including some unidentifiable mixtures. And then there are the law enforcement issues, such as marijuana-intoxicated driving and the illegal movement of vast amounts of cannabis product into other states. It's not a pretty picture from Newsweek magazine. It may be $1 billion industry, but along with it arrives a lot of social ills. Would marijuana, on balance, be good for the Canadian economy? What do you think, Ron?
Yes. Well, I've got a personal thing, because a long time ago I had an incident where I was at a rock concert, and I didn't know anything about marijuana, but I don't remember getting home that night. So what's my, if I'm going to go out and there's people smoking legally and I get secondhand smoke, can I drive home?
Okay, you're not answering the question, sir. Let's answer the question. Do you think, on the whole, it would be good for the economy?
Not on the whole. I think it's going to come back and bite them.
That the negatives will outweigh any economic positives that
I think
are
that
to be
the
had.
social, the society, the impact on society would be much bigger, and it'll end up costing us. I'm pretty sure.
And I think there's a case to be made there, Ron, and I thank you for your call from the New York Times. Law enforcement officers in Colorado and neighboring states, emergency room doctors, legalization opponents increasingly are highlighting a series of recent problems with loosening marijuana laws. There is the Denver man who, hours after buying a package of marijuana-infused Karma candy, began raving about the end of the world, then pulled a handgun from the family safe and killed his wife. Hospital officials say they're treating growing numbers of children sickened by potent doses of edible marijuana. Sheriffs in neighboring states complain about stoned drivers streaming out of Colorado and through their small towns. Christian Science Monitor. This is very interesting. No state agency records how many homeless people were drawn to Colorado by legal weed, but officials at homeless centers say the influx they are seeing strains their ability to meet the needs of the population. Denver's Salvation Army Crossroads Shelter has more than doubled staff to accommodate the increase. It did an informal survey of the roughly 500 new out-of-towners who stayed there between July and September and found a third relocated there just for pot, while Denver's Francis Center has seen an increase of as many as 300 new faces a month. Not all of them are pot smokers, but many have said they were drawn to the state because of legal marijuana. They were drawn to the state because of legal marijuana. Ben, good morning, Ben.
Good morning.
Hi there. Do you think marijuana would be good for the economy?
Yes and no. I think that you'll see a big top-line sales number delivered. I think that similar to, I'm not sure how much money the alcohol industry in Canada generates, but I'm sure that it's in the billions. I think you'll see that mirrored from a marijuana perspective.
Well, I'll give you some idea. The LCBO turns over a dividend to the Ontario government every year of about $5 billion.
Yeah, that's Ontario alone. I mean, the numbers are going to be staggering. However, I think on the flip side, the expense column is also going to be very great. And it's going to be great because you're going to be facing a huge amount of health care expenses going forward. I mean, just like alcohol has negative consequences for your health, I think marijuana, especially if you're smoking it, has greater consequences. It has everything that smoking has, except it also has effects on the brain. It has effects similar to alcohol where there could be driving accidents and deaths on the road. So I think that the healthcare system, the expense to the healthcare system is going to be massive. And so if they are going to legalize it, and I know that they are, they're going to have to tax the hell out of it to cover the healthcare costs.
And of course, if you tax the hell out of it, the price will be higher than the illegal weed. So it will fail to accomplish one of the primary goals, which is to take the profits out of organized crime.
Exactly.
Right?
But I think the other challenge that you're going to face, whereas alcohol, it's not necessarily a gateway drug. I believe that marijuana is, and I think that those who are introduced to marijuana because of the accessibility to it will move into other drugs. And again, that's a burden on the healthcare industry. It's a burden on all of us. Okay,
and education as well, Ben. Thank you. The number of Colorado middle school students caught with drugs at school is at a 10-year high. A 10-year high. 24% increase in drug reports in school is directly related to the legal marijuana industry. That's in USA Today. Judy Lutkin, school resource officer at the Aurora Police Department, said, quote, I would say that at any given time, any day of the week, there are probably 10% of the kids in high school that are under the influence of something. 10%. So, it might be a multi-billion-dollar business. We have marijuana companies already in Smiths Falls, for example, that are worth $1 billion on the stock market, but there are social costs to this as well. Will legal weed be good for the economy? Will legal weed be good for the economy? Good morning, Judith. Morning, Judith.
Hi, good morning. I'm not sure that I'm calling you. I'm talking, I think marijuana would be good for the economy, but I'm basing it more on the medical marijuana there's a huge amount of people that are taking drugs, cancer drugs, drugs for Parkinson's, all kinds of drugs that have not helped them like the marijuana is helping them now. I watched a show the other night on a man that could barely open his door. He had Parkinson's so badly, and they came in and they had a doctor, and they gave him miracle marijuana, and the man calmed down within half an hour. He was able to move his fingers. He was able to walk around.
That's a little bit outside of the topic today that I'm talking about, because probably in a year from now, marijuana is going to be legal. It's been legal for a few years in Colorado now. It's a $1 billion industry at the retail level, and it's growing double digits every year, and it's employing tens of thousands of people. Government's already hooked on the tax revenue. But when you compare that to the costs to society, healthcare, education, law enforcement, do you really come out ahead? We'll pick up on that after the news.
The issues that matter most to you. Join the conversation. This is News and Views with Rob Snow on News Talk 580 CFRA.
Talking legal marijuana. There's new data out today by the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, and it finds that pot use has virtually doubled in the last 20 years. Dr. Robert Mann is with the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. He joins me now. Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to go through some of the specifics that come with this research. First of all, let's talk about pot use.
Yes.
You say significant increases were found among all age groups. Break it down for the younger age groups, say 29 and under.
Well, we find that if we look at the younger age group specifically, that the increase there has been substantial. It's gone from less than 20% to close to 40% over that same time, when overall use rose from about 8.7% in '96 to about 14.5% in 2015. So an increase among younger users, so that about 40% or nearly 40% of them report past year cannabis use. This is not too surprising for us, because we know from the student survey that by the time students get to grades 11 and 12, that, again, close to 40% of them are past-year cannabis users.
But it has essentially doubled.
That's correct.
In 20 years.
Yes, that's correct.
How does that compare to other demographics?
Well, one of the things that we're noting as well is the aging, I guess, if you will, of cannabis users. We look at the older users, and we see that the percentage of the total cannabis-using population who are 50 years of age and older has increased from 2% in 1996 to 23%.
Wow.
So about a quarter of cannabis users now are 50 years of age and over. So really we see kind of an aging of the cannabis-using population going on.
What do you think is behind that, Doctor?
Could be a lot of reasons. One of the things I think that we would naturally look to is what we call a cohort effect. And so younger people who were using cannabis when they were younger are now getting to their 50s and 60s, and a larger proportion of them are keeping their cannabis using habit. Something we're not sure about, but we wonder as well, is perhaps a portion or a substantial portion of these folks are medical marijuana users too, and perhaps taking it up or using it for what they consider to be medical or therapeutic reasons.
Your research also examined users of marijuana who driving while stoned.
Yes.
What did you find out?
When we look at the proportion of drivers who drive after using cannabis, we do see that number has increased from 2010 to 2015. So it was about 1.5% of all drivers drove after using cannabis in the previous year, and that increased to about 3% in 2015. So that number was trending upwards.
But that's another number that's doubled.
Yes.
In a much shorter time frame.
Yes, yeah, and that's
right.
it's a concern, of course, because over the same time period, over a longer time period, we saw that driving after drinking has declined substantially, which is a very positive thing, of course, because that's a leading cause of collisions and injuries. And so it's concerning to see that driving after cannabis use was increasing between about 2010 and 2015.
I've had people call me over the years, doctor, say, I actually think my driving gets better after I smoke a joint. I'm sure you've heard that. What do you say to those people?
Yeah, there's a common perception out there among some people that that cannabis doesn't really affect your driving, or that it doesn't increase your collision risk, or maybe even that you're a safer driver, and people maybe feel that they can compensate for the effects of the drugs. Now, it's interesting to see the science that has evolved on this topic over the past 20 years. If you go back 20 years, the science was really unclear on what those risks were, and we couldn't really say. The data didn't allow us to say that, cannabis increased your collision risk. But over the past 20 years, that science has evolved substantially, and so we do know now that cannabis use does increase your chances of being involved in a collision, does affect your driving skills, and so it just increases your risks. We know that now. That's very well established in the research literature.
Thank you for joining me, Doctor. Good to hear from you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's Dr. Robert Mann, Senior Scientist with the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, 1140 now on 580 CFRA. We've been asking you all morning, will legal weed be good for the economy? Will legal weed be good for the economy? We've been looking at what's going on in Colorado. It's a $1 billion business. The claim is made it's created tens of thousands of jobs. You just heard the downside, though. And this is showing up in Colorado. More children suspended from school, showing up to school stoned, more visits to the ER, certainly more young people trying it out. Significant increases found among all age groups, according to this report from the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, but especially among 18 to 29-year-olds, where pot smoking has increased from 18% in that cohort, 18% 20 years ago. It's 38% now. 38%. It's it's doubled in 20 years. So you compare the good, the bad, the downright ugly. Is it good for the economy? Anne, good morning, Anne.
Hi.
Thank you for waiting. What do you think?
I think it's a no-brainer. You just cannot protect the youth, and that will be a cost in the future. And I have no really experience with marijuana, but the people I know who have used it have not achieved, as one of your programs did indicate, achieved their potential and actually exposed their families to a lifestyle that isn't productive either. It's just. Is a government
a lot of hardship, disappointment, and grief. I bet.
Even just the exposure. Okay, my daughter worked in New York City and in an apartment, and they had to move. The neighbor was a marijuana smoker. I mean, she wasn't going to call the police on him, but how do you protect your kids? How do you protect? And their brains are developing and exposed. I'm not sure what the what kind of effect marijuana smoke has on a child's brain, but it just. Isn't the government's job to protect? Now, could they not make the same amount of money through fines, decriminalize, but charge? Hit the pocketbook that way. Miracle marijuana, I'm all for. As I get older, I think I might need it, but in a pill form. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay.
I don't want to be chewing it or smoking it.
So, as a mom, you're opposed to it.
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you.
And a grandma.
Thank you. Jim, good morning. Do you think marijuana would be good for the economy when you weigh the good against the bad?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Your caller, a couple of calls before, his name was Ben. He stole my thunder. I agreed with everything he said. There is absolutely no upside to legalizing marijuana. I can't see it. And I'm going to tell you a personal story. In another life, in my late teens, early 20s, I drove stoned. And absolutely, it affected my driving. Absolutely. I was a very lucky man, and everyone around me was lucky. And it got to a point in my early 20s when I no more. Absolutely not. And I refuse to believe that this would be good in any way, shape, or form. Sure, it may bring in tax dollars and all the good things that the LCBO does, but that's another story.
Yep, there's tax revenue.
And
there's job creation.
Sure.
Right.
Yep. And there's hospital visits. There's
that's it.
Ambulance costs.
Yep.
There's destroyed families. Mm-hmm. There's people, that will lose their jobs. No.
No. Okay.
I don't support it.
Thank you, Jim.
All.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Thank you. Great stuff. Back right after this. News and Views on 580 CFRA.
Every day as events happen, we're there. Now back to News and Views with Rob Snow on News Talk 580 CFRA.
Loving the discussion this morning. We're talking about marijuana. Is marijuana good for the economy? Would legalized weed be good for the Canadian economy? And we've been comparing what's been going on, looking at what's going on in Colorado, where it's $1 billion industry. It's created 18,000 full-time jobs. The so-called economic output, when you take the jobs and the indirect jobs and the investment, it's $2.3 billion a year now. Growing at 11% a year in a slow-growth economy. So there are economic upsides to legalized marijuana. What are the downsides? Health, education, crime. And what's been going on in Colorado? Well, what's been going on the roads? That's a major concern to a lot of people. There is a report called the Rocky Mountain High-Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. And this is an incredible read, and it's a compilation of statistics from all the major law enforcement agencies in Colorado. So the local police force, the state law enforcement, federal officials, and it compiles all the data, and it takes a look at what's been happening on the roads with impaired driving. 1 in 5, almost 1 in 5, 20% of all traffic deaths in the state of Colorado are now marijuana related. 1 in 5. It has doubled in 5 years. As for people caught driving under the influence, DUI, 24% now test positive for marijuana. And among those who do test positive for marijuana, roughly half of them also have alcohol in their system. The total number of accidents for all reasons, so serious accidents, non-serious collisions, fender benders, whatever, is up 15%. Since pot became legal. It's interesting because for years it had been on the decline. Pot becomes legal, it starts to creep higher, and it's up 15%. The problem, of course, with impairment of marijuana is actually doing the test, because there's no roadside device that can actually measure impairment. It has to be done through a blood test or a urine test. And there's debate about what constitutes impairment. Pot can stay in your system for so long, someone could have smoked a week ago, and the THC would still be in their system even though they're not impaired, and then you're into all kinds of legal situations. So it's really a mess, folks. But this report on impairment on the roads, on the highways, in Colorado, it's a problem that's getting worse. So legalizing weed, good for the economy? What do you think? Ron, good morning, Ron.
Yeah, good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm good, sir. Thank you.
Oh boy, I'm one of those that the doc just mentioned. I'm one of those in their 50s, a person who uses cannabis for medical purposes, and it's hard for me to poo-poo legalization, and I would feel like a hypocrite to poo-poo legalization, and still. But anyway, let's go to the topic. Will it be a boon to our economy? I think the numbers, if you extrapolate those from Colorado, the numbers will be astronomical here. When the 5 million people or whatever he has extrapolated to 35 million.
I look at the population of Colorado similar to the population of British Columbia.
Yeah,
GDP of Colorado similar to the GDP of British Columbia. You can take those numbers, multiply them by 10. Maybe you get a rough idea of what the situation would be.
And even in
Canada.
Ontario, the numbers will be crazy with our population base here. So I think the windfall initially will be unbelievable. Some of the will it be now? The question I think is your question really is two-part. Is it will the benefits of the windfall of those tax dollars outweigh the potential social costs of legalizing this drug? Right?
Exactly.
I think so. We have a two-part question.
Yeah.
I think maybe some of those numbers might have been a little bit exaggerated. I think we're now, for better or for worse, for decades now, Canada has been a pot smoking culture. Would you give that to me?
I would say parts of the country.
Parts of the country, a decent percentage of the population here.
Well, I mean, we're at the point, and it all depends on how old you are. I mean, the doctor who was just on the program said 40. If you're under 29, 40% of Canadians under 29 have smoked pot in the last year.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, has smoked pot in the last year. That's a really, that's so big deal. So, I mean, is that the only number? I mean, is that the only reference point? I should say, has smoked pot in the last year. So I smoked pot once, and so let's talk about the 18 to 29-year-olds. They're likely to smoke pot for recreation purposes, probably more than those of us, that are have terrible aches and pains and suffer.
Sure.
And right, okay. So,
but then he also said,
but they are adults.
Well,
Rob.
this
we
is
do
it.
consider them to be adults.
Yeah, I mean, if you are of the libertarian bent, Ron, we're going to have to wrap it up there. You can look at this as it's adults selling weed to adults, as long as everyone's playing by the rules. But this will be the last. We'll take one more, okay? We'll take one more, and that'll be it. Mark, do you think legalizing weed would be good for the economy? Very quickly, sir.
Hello? Yeah.
Yeah, Mark.
Okay. I 100% agree that you should legalize it. Everybody makes choices in life. It's the same with alcohol. If, drinking and driving is not good, smoking and driving is not good.
Yeah, Mark, that's not really the question. Do you think when you look at the positives, the negatives, the pros, the cons, and from the economic point of view, would it be good for the economy?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay, gotta go. Gotta run. The new news is coming up next. And don't forget Dr. Barry Dworkin in the Wednesday House Call. He is in at 1 o'clock today here on 580 CFRA.